right, good evening wherever you are, and welcome to another edition of the Business Advocate on Ghana Television on Thursday, 28th day of April 2016. Tonight we're discussing rescuing businesses from insolvency. This is an issue that I think that we really need to deal with if we need to sanitize our business environments, plus other related and relevant issues. Now, all over the world, wherever businesses operate, there's bound to be the unfortunate occurrence of operators, owners, or companies sometimes becoming debtors because they are unable to pay their debts when they are due. Now, any environment serious of doing business must therefore not only take cognizance of this fact, but also put in place pragmatic measures and arrangements will contain that situation referred to as insolvency. Failure to do that contributes to the creation of an unfriendly and uncompetitive business climate that easily sends businesses to their graves. Earlier, I should say. Ghana currently has the body's Corporate Official Liquidation Act 1963 Act 180. But then business leaders in Ghana, notably insolvency and restructuring practitioners led by the Ghana Association of Restructuring and Insolvency Advisors, GARIA, hold a strong view that this law has not got the clout to prevent companies from premature liquidation. They contend that the current law is inimical to the growth of business in Ghana, in that the law lacks well-structured insolvency regime that allows companies to fall on alternative options to recover rather than shut down. GARIA is advocating for a legal regime that will close the lacuna that's been exploited, if you like, by debtors that has the tendency of pushing companies to liquidation. Now, question, is GARIA's assertion a false alarm or a true reflection and assessment of the situation? The latter requires that we took GARIA serious in their advocacy to get the draft Corporate Insolvency Bill, which is currently before Cabinet, passed into law with speed. Tonight, Business Advocate will critically examine the merits of GARIA's call for a corporate insolvency law that allows for restructuring and provides a lifeline to companies faced with premature liquidation. Business Advocate is brought to you by the Booster Fund in collaboration with the GBC and GJA. Good evening and welcome to the program once again. Our test line is 0261783382. Number again is 0261783382. Welcome aboard. Now, let me introduce to you my guest for the evening, and as it's always been said, ladies first. So I'm going to introduce Ms. Domtier Efia Sapong, who is a principal state attorney, Registrar General's Department. Ifya, good evening, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. Then I also have, after Ifya, I have Mr. Jacob Sarr, who is Executive Secretary, Ghana Association of Restructuring and Insolvency Advisors. Good evening, sir.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jacob.
Thank you.
I also have, right ahead of Mr. Clifford in Paris, from the Private Enterprise Federation. He's also the Chief Executive of Frontline Capital Advisors. Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Let me start by asking a few things about GARIA, when it was formed, your aims and objectives, and I believe this will come straight away to you, Jacob.
Thank you, Lee. GARIA came as a result of some individuals having worked on some major insolvency assignments in the country, coming together, and from the lessons that they had learned from those assignments, decided that it was time for them to put their knowledge together, to put their experience together, to get such an organization in place. GARIA was incorporated in 2006, August 2006, and it's basically to play an advocacy role. It's an association made up of lawyers, accountants, and bankers who have an interest in insolvency and restructuring. And like I said, is to play an advocacy role in the area of insolvency and restructuring. And there are key areas. One is legislative reform, and I think that's the reason why we are here today. The other one is institutional reform. There's the need to look at the institutions that handle insolvency now. And the other is capacity building for those individuals who get engaged in insolvency assignments. So really, that's why GARIA came into being.
Great. Back to you, Jacob. I kept on hearing insolvency in your opening remarks. For the sake of viewers, could you tell us or describe this monster called insolvency?
Well, insolvency could be a monster when it hits you in the face. But actually, it's a very simple thing.
Okay.
It's when an individual or a business is unable to pay its debts when they fall due. So basically, if you owe some money or you owe and you're unable to pay when they fall due, then you are deemed to be insolvent. Yes, so insolvency in that sense is very basic, very simple. When you're unable to pay your debts, you are said to be insolvent.
More clarification. So what really prompted GARIA to go to a booster fund for support?
Well, we had been doing this thing for some time. Like I said, GARIA was established in 2006. And one of the key things that challenges that we took upon ourselves was the reform of the body's Corporate Official Liquidations Act, the act that you referred to in your introduction. We had worked with the Attorney General. The Attorney General actually set up the Committee of Experts on Company Law Reform. So we were invited by the Attorney General at the time to also work on the body's Corporate Official Liquidations Act. We did that. We submitted our recommendations to the Committee of Experts and to the Attorney General, and we came up with a draft bill. At that stage, whilst we were in the process of doing this, there was the need for stakeholder interaction. We did that. But now that the bill is in place, as it were, there's the need for further interaction with stakeholders. There's the need for further advocacy. And we thought that BUSAC would be a good partner in doing this. So we went to BUSAC because we are at a point where we thought that the leverage that BUSAC would provide to us would ensure that we could move this bill forward.
Okay. Clifford, let me come to you on this. There is a law currently on insolvency. What does that law say, and what do you consider the shortfall of that particular law?
As a businessman and somebody who runs a company, I think what Jacob said is exactly the kind of threat that every businessman faces, which is if you're in a situation where your liabilities overwhelm your assets, then basically you're insolvent. So what do you do when you are confronted with that issue? The current law doesn't allow corporates to declare insolvent and then restructure. And I think that's why we are here, because globally there is this global law that talks about if you're bankrupt or insolvent, you have the right, as long as you go through the legal processes, to restructure or reorganize and then come out, emerge from that bankruptcy to be able to then continue with business. And then when you look at insolvency laws throughout history, there have been really three stages. The first stage was where you would notice that in that period, creditors were the ones who were beneficiaries of the law. So they force, the debtors to pay by any means necessary. Then the second stage was when the debtors, by some reason, became the ones who were beneficiaries. So you could have a situation where the law says that 70% of your debt is given away, so that you don't owe 70% of your debt anymore. And then the final stage has been where the national interest predominates, where basically we're saying the welfare of the state is important. So employees' rights are important. You can't just put a company into insolvency and affect the employees to the detriment of everybody. And so what we are talking about is a situation where all these can be put into a legislative arrangement where businesses, especially in Ghana, can benefit emerging out of insolvency.
If I believe strongly that insolvency issues, have a link with legal regimes, and you being a principal state attorney, where do you come in here? Because you also have a role to play.
That is true. I'm from the Registrar General's Department.
That's right.
And we administer the official Bodies Corporate Official Liquidations Act.
Great.
Act 180, 1962. And it's when a company is insolvent, there are several ways that they can come under that law to have the company liquidated. So that's how you come in. You can petition, the companies can come by special resolution. If they think they are insolvent, they kind of meet their, as a debt falls due, they are unable to pay, So the company can decide by special resolution that we want to have this company liquidated. There are instances too that a creditor or a contributory or a member could petition the official liquidator to have the company liquidated. And then also members, contributories, even the Attorney General can petition the court if a company is insolvent and needs to be liquidated. They can come under the official Bodies Corporate Official Liquidations Act.
Let's find out, and this will come to you, Jacob. Before I do that, let me announce our text line once again: 0261783382. 0261783382 is the number, and we're discussing rescuing businesses from insolvency. Jacob, can you tell us how the shortcomings under the particular legal regime we're talking about affects business operations in Ghana? Let's, look at the damages that it is doing to us.
Yes, I think Clifford, in his intervention, alluded to some of it. Currently, the law that we have only makes provision for liquidations, and I think if you also mentioned that. So whenever you're unable to pay your debts, for instance, a creditor goes to court, gets judgment, attaches your assets, you're unable, the judgment is not satisfied from those assets, you go into liquidation, a demand is made upon you, after 21 days you're unable to pay, you go into liquidation. But the fact of the matter is that some of these things may just be temporary, some of these difficulties, because like we said, the definition of insolvency is inability to pay your debts. So it could be a temporary thing that has come on, say, for 6 months, and maybe all you need is some moratorium and you get back to your old ways, good, healthy ways. So where there's an absence of some procedure to restructure your business, you definitely have a problem. So what you have today is that some companies that can be rescued, and some of these are major companies that, if we were to mention their names here, we all know them. They may have temporary difficulty, and because there are no provisions. And there's one example that actually readily comes to mind. That company really could have been rescued, but because there was no provision for restructuring, that company went under. What that means is that there are several companies that can be saved.
Can we cite the Eswa Ghana Airways in that light?
Well, I think that's a very good example. That's a very good example because the underlying business of Ghana Airways seriously was good at the time. There were problems perhaps with management, problems with their overheads, etc., problems with fleet and all the rest. But the key things, the roots were very viable.
Really?
Yes, the underlying business was good, and they had some temporary problems. And I do remember that there were attempts to restructure the company. Then at that time, one creditor took action by seizing one of the aircraft of the company. And once that happens, then obviously, any idea of restructuring would not happen. If we had a law, for instance, like the Americans have Chapter 11, and indeed, airlines such as Delta, such as
They've all gone
United,
through that.
they all went through Chapter
Yes.
11, and they
Oh, I
came,
see.
and they
Yes.
came out of it.
Yes.
So
the
if-
airline industry is notorious in the U.S. for declaring Chapter 11. And that's because of the nature of their business. It can be very seasonal. It can be very heavy in terms of debt. And so when you go through that period where you are debt laden and you don't have any insolvency law that allows you to go through the reorganization and restructuring and pay off certain debts with time and with an understanding with the creditors that they need to come on board and deal with you in a fair way, then you're going to go under. And that's the situation that we find ourselves in Ghana.
Yeah,
A
and
lot
to-
of companies.
To add to that, I'll just give you, we know of the doing business report of the
Yes.
of the World
Index,
Bank,
yeah.
the index,
Yes.
and one of the indicators is resolving insolvency. And currently, Ghana,
i.e., the closure of businesses?
closure
right?
of businesses,
Okay.
etc. And currently, Ghana ranks 161 out of 189
That's not
countries.
encouraging at all.
Yes. The overall rank of Ghana is 114 out of 189. So which means that insolvency or resolving insolvency has actually dragged us down. So in such a situation, you can be sure that even in terms of attracting businesses here, in terms of the attractiveness of our economy, there are issues there because our insolvency law is not up to speed. It's not up to international best practice.
Before Ifya comes in, Jacob, can you give us a practical example of how this change we're looking for can help save distressed businesses? How would it be arrangement practically, so people understand? For instance, if company A owes company B and all that, you want to take us through that?
Okay, just to go through that, and with emphasis on the practical aspect of it.
Exactly.
So let's say company A, for instance, is insolvent or is approaching insolvency. And the thing is that if there are provisions on restructuring, rescue, or reorganization, then you don't wait to be insolvent.
Are there early warning signs?
There are early warning signs for every business. There's a demise curve. You start at a business, you grow, you top up at some point, and you start declining. So at some point there are warning signs that there are clear warning signs, and at that stage, if you have a law that provides for rescue or restructuring or turnaround, it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Then what you do is you take advantage of it. So at that stage, you start the process. And what happens is that when you start the process, there's a moratorium. So all creditors are stayed. What tends to happen is that creditors tend to panic. When they see companies in difficulty, they panic. So everybody wants to get first mover advantage. So that's where you see multiplicity of suits, people trying to enforce and all that. But what this sort of law would do is that it stays the hand of everybody, every creditor.
Okay.
So you all have to wait. And then the company that is indebted has to come up with a proposal and present to all the creditors. When the creditors accept it, then the creditors are bound. Basically, there are two ways that these things happen. Chapter 11 in the US that we've talked about. In that case, the directors of the company stay in place. They come out with a proposal, they stay in place, and then manage the company. But there's the other alternative, which is administration, which is in the UK, where these people leave the company and you appoint an administrator what we have chosen, what we have in this law, is closer to the UK model.
Okay.
So when you have such a situation, what happens is that company takes steps to put the directors take steps to put the company into administration. An administrator comes in, a third party comes in, and that person is the one who will be responsible for restructuring the company. So, in effect, what you are looking at is the collective benefit of all, as opposed to the benefit of one creditor or one. Yeah. So, practically, that's how it's supposed to work.
If you how well would you say, or if you like, how well or bad would you say as a country we have handled issues of insolvency? Good, satisfactory, or bad?
I think we are handling it well. For us at Registrar Generals, when we look at the statistics, it's not that many. Companies may go in distress, but they might not go through the official liquidations. We probably have maybe 4 in a year going through the official liquidations, so that if they are in distress, I feel they have, even before this insolvency, corporate insolvency law bill comes in, within the company, I feel they can do something. When they see the company going down, I believe that they can do something. But we administer the law, so when they come, it gets stressful on unsuspecting, investors, creditors. It takes a toll on the people because they've put their whole lives in it, and then they will see something that they've built being liquidated. So it's whatever that we receive from the assets, realize, then we distribute it, as dividends to the creditors.
Okay.
So it has its good sides and the bad side. If it need be that it has to be liquidated, yes, but
Jacob, what has GARIA done so far in terms of advocacy?
Well, in terms of advocacy, I think that the major thing that we've done is actually coming up with this draft bill.
Okay.
We worked on that draft bill. But in addition to that, we've had a couple. In fact, we brought a couple of experts into the country a few years ago. A former South African judge of the Supreme Court of Appeals, a very knowledgeable person in insolvency. We brought him to this country a few years ago to address a public forum and also to engage with policymakers here. We also brought somebody who was then the president of Insol International, which is the umbrella organization of insolvency associations in the world. He was also here, and he had a very useful interaction with policymakers and the rest. We've put together some training programs, some discussions on various areas of insolvency, and also the responsibilities of directors. So we've been quite engaged, and we hope to do more than what we've done so far.
And who have been your main duty bearers?
Our main duty bearers have been the private sector and also government institutions such as the Registrar General's Department, the Attorney General's Department, the Ministry of Trade and Industry. We've engaged.
Have they been cooperative?
Oh,
satisfactory?
They have. I must say that at the individual level and at the institutional level, they've been quite cooperative. We've received quite a lot of support from the Attorney General, past and current Attorney General, so also Registrar Generals. We've received quite a lot of support from them. So I'll say by and large, our interaction has been very fruitful.
What stage are we now, in pushing forward this bill? Where are we now currently?
Well, the bill is before cabinet.
Yes, that we know. So what are we left to do?
Well, it's actually to get through the maze in cabinet. We had interactions with cabinet, the cabinet subcommittee responsible for this bill. We had interactions with them. They gave us feedback, and we worked on the feedback and actually revised the draft that we had. One of the key areas, and we're very grateful for that, because there's this whole area of cross-border insolvency, which we didn't touch in our original proposal, our original bill, but Cabinet prompted us that we should do that, so we actually incorporated provisions on cross-border insolvency. So the feedback that we got from Cabinet was very helpful. Well, now I guess it's still before Parliament, Cabinet, sorry, and I don't know the workings of Cabinet that well. But like I said, the Attorney General has been very cooperative, the Deputy as well. They've been very cooperative, and they have assured us that they are pushing this thing through, and that it may see the light of day very soon.
Do you expect an agency to be attached to this?
Oh, there's a need for agency to be attached to this, and I'll give you the reason for that. This bill is a companion bill to the Companies Act.
Okay.
So, for instance, I mean, the lawyers would know that the Companies Act is Act 179, and the Bodies Corporate Official Liquidations Act is 180. So the two of them go together. And quite a lot of work has been done on the Companies Act in terms of review. And I think that the Companies Act is ahead of the Corporate Insolvency Bill. The Companies Act is actually in Parliament at the moment. So there's quite a bit of catching up to do. So there's some agency. There's some agency.
But if I have to come to you, Clifford, you might, I don't know whether you might want to speak to it, but if it's before Cabinet now, as Jacob is saying, who should facilitate the movement forward? Because it cannot be there forever. What should be the next step should be taken, and what are we waiting for?
I think advocacy is what
key,
is needed. But from the private point of view, I am a venture capitalist and private equity investor. And I have come across a lot of companies that I would say qualify for insolvency. And if this bill became law, they could go through the process and then go through a reorganization that will make them healthier companies that could actually facilitate mergers and acquisition in the country. And that could really then help this whole process of companies scaling up. What is typical in Ghana is that most people want to be small businesses. What about large operations, large companies that can hire more employees and have more of an impact on the economy? We don't have that. And I think one of the reasons is because of not having this insolvency law that allows company to basically have a problem and solve the problem within, as opposed to going to the liquidation route. To me, that's the last step anybody needs to take. Because when that happens, you're selling off all your assets, the company ceases to exist. And what we need is for the company to say, I'm able to pay my debt, give me time. I run into that all the time. Companies that come to me and say, we are in trouble, but we can't pay the debt. But if I'm the creditor, I want my money paid. So what do you do? How do you negotiate between the debtor and the creditor? And this bill will allow that to happen, so that if there's a creditor committee that allows the creditor to accept something that is not the ideal, then basically what is happening is that the whole community wins. So advocacy, the business community understanding that this bill is good for them and is something that needs to pass.
You want to come in here? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, I totally agree with him. Because if it comes, we will welcome it. Because for us, you know, in the life of a company, there's the birth, that's the registration, and then the death of it. The liquidation kills it. At the end of it, it has to be struck off the register. It's dissolved and it's struck off the register. But at least if there's another option and it comes, the companies would, if they are distressed, they will have options. So we welcome that. We welcome that.
Okay. Okay. Jacob, I want to take us through some more of the highlights of the new draft bill?
Yes, I think one of the key provisions is what we've already flogged, the area of administration. I also alluded to cross-border insolvency issues. We mentioned Ghana Airways earlier, and I'll use Ghana Airways to illustrate this because, now we are in a global village, and the business here in Ghana may have assets all over the globe, as was the case with Ghana Airways. So Ghana Airways had assets in the West African sub-region. Several countries had assets in Germany, had assets in US and the rest. So once there's insolvency in Ghana, there's an impact elsewhere. And how do you deal with that? We don't have provisions on that now. Under the current bill, we have provisions for that. I talked about insolvency practitioners, for instance. There are people who do the work of insolvency practitioners, but there's no regulation to anybody at all. I mean, the fact is that when a company goes into liquidation, then the law says that it's a registrar general who becomes the liquidator. So that is taken care of. But there are people who play several roles in that, receiver, managers, and the rest. There's no regulation. This bill actually introduces provisions on regulation, on admission and supervision of insolvency practitioners. So that's also a very key area. The bill also has provisions on insolvency services department, more or less, which initially will be run by the registrar of companies. We are looking at the institutional. You must have institutional arrangements which will ensure that the practitioners are doing the right thing, etc., etc. So there are various things in there. Of course, the bill retains the provisions of Act 180 on liquidation.
Okay.
They have been revised, but by and large, they have been retained. So these are, generally speaking, these are some of the features of the bill.
And with the bill, if in future passed into law and all that, factor in the interest of SMEs? That's one question. Okay. And then second, looking at foreign investors, what does it mean to them before coming to Ghana?
Okay, in terms of SMEs, so long as you are incorporated here in Ghana, the bill will apply to you, whether you are small or big. Okay. Whether you're small or big. The challenge with some SMEs, or the challenge is that sometimes you have a company that goes into liquidation and really does not have any assets. So provision is made in the bill for such a liquidation to take place, for instance, and some have funds provided for the running of the liquidation. So to that extent, the issue of SMEs is taken care of. For foreign investors, like I said earlier, insolvency, the insolvency regime contributes to the attractiveness or non-attractiveness of your economy. So, for instance, if a foreign investor wants to come to Ghana, the investor wants to be sure that if there's any problem with my company, how is that going to be resolved? And you see that these investors tend to want to see what they are used to in where they go. So, for instance, if an American business is coming to Ghana, then of course, they probably will be interested in knowing whether Chapter 11 and all those things are available. So, to the extent that we can make our law modern, to the extent that we can bring our law up to the standards, international best practice and the rest, that should make it attractive for investors. And finally, the point is that if we are 161 out of 189, you know what that means for anybody who's looking at this economy.
I have two questions for you again. One, how injurious would it be if we keep delaying to get this bill through? And also let's look at some of the hurting times our business environment has gone through, because I want people to really appreciate the need to support this advocacy. Jacob.
Well, insolvency can be abstract. but it has very practical implications. I mean, as we sit here, we talk about insolvency. It may sound very technical, very abstract, but it has very practical, yes. So, for instance, I think that Clifford mentioned that, I mean, employees, when a company goes bankrupt, when a company is liquidated, a company that has about 800 employees, what are they going to do? You know, that's the issue. What are they going to do? 800 people sent home with dependents and all the rest. So if there's a way of rescuing that company, then of course everybody benefits. The economy benefits, the employees benefit. Even let's look at creditors. I don't think that the objective of any creditor is really to run down a business. I mean, you give credit to a company and you want to maintain a long-standing relationship with a company. So when a creditor has to rush and come and liquidate a company, place a company into liquidation, what actually happens is that they get what is owed, or part of it. Most times they don't get everything. They get what is owed to them, but they lose all the future. They lose all the future earnings and the rest. So it has practical implications. And sometimes, I mean, even if, when we look at the big players, creditors and the rest, sometimes it's just a small supplier. Because I recall one of the liquidations I was involved with. Yes. There was a supplier who had actually supplied ties a few days before the liquidation. Car ties. Had supplied car ties to the company a few days before the liquidation. And then the company went into liquidation. And by law, you couldn't go and grab the car ties. Wow. So you had to fall into the pool, unsecured creditor. In that particular case, we were looking at, for every 1 CD, you were going to get like 20 pesos. That was the end of that particular supplier's business. That was the end of the business. You see, so it has serious implications for SMEs, for everybody. So the earlier we pass this law, I think the better it will be for all of us. I mean, we refer to Ghana Airways. Yes, perhaps if this law was in place a few years ago, maybe, just maybe, we could have rescued them.
Prior to coming to this panel discussion, I had an opportunity to review the Global Bankruptcy Index that tracks the bankruptcies that occur globally. And what I realized since 2000 was that it flatlines basically, so the number of bankruptcies is pretty consistent on a yearly basis until you got to 2008, which was the start of the financial crisis. And then you had a huge rise. And then it went on for about 2 years, which was about the duration of the financial crisis. And then it dipped, which meant that the financial crisis created more companies in distress, which is the same situation that would occur in Ghana if you have a financial crisis. It just exacerbates the situation. And then when you look at the index after 2010, it returned back to that flat line. So because they had those laws, companies were able to go through restructuring, reorganize, and come out. That's why the level of bankruptcy in terms of the index got back to this original flat line.
So if indeed we have these obvious benefits, why the long delay in seeing this bill through? What I want to find out the role that the Attorney General is playing in this regard, because they seem to be pushing. Who's responding to that one for me? They are not here, but why the delay? I don't understand.
Well, I think that, I'll try and answer that question. It's difficult to explain the delay. Indeed, there's goodwill all over the place, and therefore it becomes even more difficult to explain the delay. But I think that they are quite, in my interaction with the officers of the Attorney General and other players, it seems to me that there's awareness that there's a need for this bill to be passed into law as quickly as possible. and therefore it's difficult to explain the delay. But like Clifford said, and like we've said previously, I mean, what we need to do is to continue with advocacy. We definitely need to continue.
But we can't continue advocacy for the rest of our time. I mean, at a particular point in time, there should be some action that must be taken, and who must take that step? You play your role advocating. So from there, what happens? That's my worry.
I believe, I mean, passing a law, it takes some time. I know that at this time it's in cabinet, so we'll give it some time. I believe Attorney General is also interested in this bill, and eventually it will be passed, but maybe we just have to...
Can we speculate that the delay is because we don't see this as a priority? Otherwise, why? Clifford.
As an urgency, because it's interesting. I spoke to one lawyer about this whole bill and what he thought about it, and his response was interesting. He told me that this type of law, actually, one was drafted way back in '66 and has been in the books for all this time, but has never got the presidential assent.
Can you imagine?
So all this time, it just hasn't happened. So you are right. I mean, what is it? What is going to take it to move to the next stage? And I'm not a politician, so I can't really speculate.
Like a private person.
I'm a private person. I don't know what it's going to take, but it's needed. I mean, it's just a simple fact of life that in Ghana there are a lot of distressed companies that are just not functioning. And the next step, as I said, is logically to liquidate. But that's not good for anybody. They can restructure if you give them that avenue, that option to restructure. So the employees can either come back or you can add to the employee base. And that's what we need. We need jobs.
Yes.
That is the importance of this kind of a bill. And sometimes it just is not taken as seriously as it should be, because there are more pertinent issues that we deal with, more serious issues that we
comes
deal.
in. I mean, if we want our business environment to thrive, these are some of the things we be taken serious.
True.
And so, but then, will in the event where this bill goes through, would it rob a creditor of his right of exercising that 21-day power is to compel a business to be liquidated?
No, it doesn't take
doesn't.
away.
Okay.
It doesn't in any way take
Okay.
away the right of of a creditor to enforce any judgment or anything of the sort. A creditor still has the option to go to court and enforce whatever judgment that the creditor gets. But what it does is that it introduces another option, and this is really for the company to be proactive.
Okay.
So what you do is that the company has to take the first step to preempt steps taken by creditors. So basically, what you do is that you go ahead of the creditor. You go ahead of the creditor. You go into administration, and then you make a proposal to the creditor. And it's only when the creditors accept it that you can go on to restructure the company. So yes, the creditor still has that possibility of going to court, that possibility of enforcing his or her rights, etc. And sometimes, I mean, the company can look at it. We owe you money.
Yes.
You've made a demand, and they look at it and probably will pay you off because it wouldn't actually affect the business as a whole. And let's remember that it is not every situation. I mean, it's not every situation that would actually take a company into insolvency. So a company, as much as possible, will continue to pay its debts, will try its best to pay its debts. But in the eventuality that things become very difficult, that is when this law actually kicks in. When things become very difficult and it's clear to you that you're unable to pay your debts, that's when you can take advantage of the provisions of this law and go into administration.
I have a worry. My worry now is, as we sit here, we risk leaving this set without knowing exactly when we're going to say this bill go through. That's my worry. So we'll not come and sit here again and be lamenting over that. That's why I kept asking, at whose doorstep should we be expecting the step to be taken to run us through from cabinet to where it has to go to? I'm just thinking aloud.
The promoter of the bill is actually the Attorney General.
Exactly.
Yes. The promoter of this bill is the Attorney General. So if there's any action that has to be taken, it has to be taken by the Attorney General.
Great.
I mean, that's very clear.
That's where I want to get. Then at least we know.
But I think that what's also lacking
Okay.
is this point that the business community, the private sector, have actually not taken up the course of this bill, or even the course of the Companies Act.
Clifford, why?
That's a good question. I don't think there's been enough information out there
Okay.
about the bill or the existence of the bill or an explanation of the issues that may be lacking in Act 180.
Okay.
So that this bill solves that issue. And so if we want to be like everybody else, and you know, sometimes in Ghana we want to be different, and we should not be different. We should learn from other jurisdictions and best practices, and this is best practice. We don't only have Chapter 11 in the US, you have Chapter 3, Chapter 7, Chapter 11, Chapter 9, different ways to solve this issue. And so I think the business community needs to get on board and push this bill as much as others are pushing it, so that it moves from cabinet to where it becomes law, so that everybody benefits. Because I think it's affecting the entire business community in terms of the way we do business in Ghana. Because if anybody is coming to do business in Ghana and you don't have an insolvency law, they will think twice. Because if they run into problems, how are they going to unwind business? Or how are they going to restructure so that they can move forward? It could be a very simple thing that if you get your creditors and debtors together, the problem will be resolved. So insolvency's goal is really ultimately geared towards the relief of a debtor's debt. And incidentally, there's a biblical reference to that. In Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 2, the Bible talks about the creditor release of debt to his neighbor or brother after 7 years.
That's right.
So, total release. And it is called the Lord's release. So the Lord has released you. You're no longer, right. A debtor. And so an attempt to use this law to solve or reorganize in any way is not just to the benefit of the debtor or creditor, but it's nationwide.
I'm happy Jacob mentioned the fact that there needs to be more educational awareness creation for the players within the private sector. So what is PEF doing, PEF and the others? What are you doing to sensitize the players of the private sector so that once they understand, it will be an impetus into fighting for this bill to go through?
I think the general issue is to make sure that we all go out there and make sure that we have the information for businesses to be aware and get on board to try to get this very important bill passed. And I think PEF is doing its part, but it needs to be a larger cooperation amongst different institutions, not just the private sector, but the governmental institution, the advocate institutions, even international institutions, to get this law passed. And so I think it should be a collaborative effort from all fronts.
If you are, and if I say you, not you as a person, but your department falls under the Attorney General's department. Now it has come to realization though subtly, that they need to give a further push, okay, to see this bill through. And what message would you send to them, back to them, that tonight we realize that they got to do a lot?
Well, obviously, I'm going to send it to the Attorney General. Let her know that it's something that she needs to look at. It's important to the business community, in the marketplace. People want to be confident that when their company is distressed, they will have options instead of, just killing the whole business. So,
You send a message across?
I'll send the message across, yes.
I can see Jacob nodding.
Because we'll welcome it. If it's passed, it gives options. I mean, not everyone needs to liquidate their companies. If they have options to, restructure the company, why not? Why not? So absolutely, I'll send the message across to you.
We've got about 3 to 4 minutes to go. But Jacob, let's look at another practical example again. The issue of the Bank for Housing and Construction, or how can we play that into this discussion? Insolvency, and looking for this corporate insolvency bill.
Okay. From what I recall of Bank for Housing and Construction, the liquidation of Bank for Housing and Construction, which I was actually involved with.
Okay.
And I think some key personnel or key members of GARIA were also involved with that. At the beginning, I said that GARIA came about as a result of the experience we had on some major, and Bank for Housing and Construction was one of them. Bank for Housing and Construction actually had assets, and on a balance sheet basis, I believe that the company at that time was not insolvent, but had some major issues to do with liquidity. And as a bank, because of that, the bank could not survive. It raises issues about whether, if we had this law in place, or if we had provisions on restructuring, etc., whether that bank could have been saved. It's quite possible. Like I said, sometimes what you have, the problem you have, is only of a temporary nature. So I think that was part of one of the lessons that we learned. Yes, from that particular liquidation. Yes.
What do you make of Busa Fund support? Is it very useful?
Oh yes, I think BUSAC has been very helpful to us. Naturally, I mean, we are on BUSAC's platform now, so and they say radio gets results, but I think television even gets more results. So I'm sure that the policymakers have heard us this evening. But BUSAC has helped us in a number of ways. For instance, we had some interactions with the press in the past, and it was actually a direct result of one of these press interactions that we were invited by cabinet to really go and discuss the bill. We have actually talked to BUSAC about the possibility of having some workshop with some key stakeholders to discuss this bill. In October, Ghana will be hosting other insolvency players from Africa. And again, we are looking to BUSAC along with other donors to help us to put up a very successful conference. We are hoping that by that time this bill would have been passed into law, and of course we can showcase our law to the rest of the continent.
I believe in class we're watching that this evening. I'm saying these guys want more money. But before we go, I've got my time keeps reducing. Clifford, when we leave here tonight, and I meet you outside, what would you say about this discussion? Is it worth its salt?
I think it's actually been a very interesting discussion, and it's been on point. and I hope that the information that the audience is getting is worthwhile, and it will be transmitted across the length and breadth of the country, so that the ultimate goal is to get this bill enacted into law. And based on that, for the last hour in which we have been talking, I think a lot of good points have come out. And if nothing at all, what I always say is that we are not that different from other countries, and we should act like it and have things done similarly, so we can attract people to a country to build the country. So the economic environment needs to improve, and if there are minor or little things that can be done, I don't see why we would hesitate. It should be something that cabinet goes ahead and approve it, and then moves on to the next stage, so that we can have an enabling environment. That's what we always talk about, an enabling environment for business to thrive. The government doesn't have to do a whole lot, but allow business to function. And I think this kind of a law allows businesses to function.
All right. My time is gone now, and I must say a big thanks to all of you this evening. It's been an enlightening and insightful discussion. We've been taking a look at rescuing business from insolvency. My guest this evening had been Ms. Domti Efia Sapon, Principal State Attorney, Registrar General Department. Thank you very much, Efia, for your time this evening. Appreciation to you, Mr. Jacob Sa, Executive Secretary, Ghana Association of Restructuring and Insolvency Advisors. Thanks to you also, Mr. Clifford Impari, Private Enterprise Federation. He's also a Chief Executive of the Frontline Capital Advisors. So we'll get back to you again, God willing, next week with the organization of the Business Advocate, brought to you by the Booster Fund in collaboration with the GBC and the GJA. Thanks for watching. Good evening. And to all those who could not send a message this week, I don't know what went on, but well, we'll get through sometime next week. Till then, bye for now.